Welcome to the Landscaping Podcast. My name is Joel Barnett and I am your host. And in today's episode, I'm talking with Lucy Willcox from Lucy Willcox Garden Design. So Lucy is a designer based in southwest of London. What first drew my attention to Lucy's gardens was the overall look of it and how it looked like a lot of gardens do in Australia at the moment with the plant selections and hard surfaces. But as I said, she's based in South London. So it was fascinating because I've usually got a fair idea on where a garden is based in the world from the look of it. So I was curious to see about her story and where her horticultural knowledge came from. And it was also fascinating hearing how she was yet another person who studied graphic design and photography early. So she had that creative juices flowing early, and she's clearly got a strong passion for the industry as well. It was obvious right from the start. And she was awesome to talk to. So hopefully you enjoy this chat with Lucy Willcox. Lucy, thank you very much for joining us on the Landscaping Podcast. My first question for you is, how did you start in the industry?
So I used to produce TV commercials, and I was working in the industry for about 10 years, and I loved it. But I because I was on the production side, I wasn't on the creative side. I really wanted to do something different, and I'd trained in photography and graphic design. And I'd always loved gardens, even for like my first flat that I had a tiny little terrace. It was just full of plants. And then when we bought our first house, which was completely dilapidated, and the garden literally was 6 foot high, and it was 6 foot high in plants, and the garden was only 6 meters by 12 meters, and you couldn't even see to the back of the garden. That's how overgrown it was. And really from the process of that, I just got the bug, and I had an allotment space at the back. And I wasn't dissatisfied working in TV production, but I just kind of had a niggling thing. I wasn't sure if I was going to go back to photography or what I was going to do, go and do something else. And I was literally on the phone to one of my best friends saying, I really need to find something else. I don't know what it is. Something that's still creative. And I was in the garden, and I then thought, hang on a minute, maybe I could do something garden related. And originally I was going to train in horticulture, and then I discovered garden design. I mean, I knew that there were garden designers, but it wasn't so well publicized. Now it's like a massive boom. You know, there are so many garden designers. And so I retrained in 2006, 2007 at Inchbold School of Design, which is in London, which is one of the oldest garden design schools. And I've never looked back. And I'm even more obsessed now than when I started, which is 18 years ago or something like that.
Yeah, it's awesome when you can find something that you love that you actually can get paid for as well.
Exactly. It's a massive Brucey bonus. I mean, I'm not very good at switching off either. So I'm sort of, I tend to work on the weekends and things like that. But, I love it.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. Like, I love it, just talking to people who are passionate about what they do. Like, if it's passionate about what I like as well, it's better. But
yeah,
I've heard people talk about beekeeping and just all sorts of random things. And I love it just because of how much they love it. Like, it's infectious, how much they love their job.
Definitely.
And I feel sorry for people who don't, who haven't found that passion, and they go to work hating their job, and it just must make life so much harder.
Totally. I was at an awards do on Friday night, which was for the Barley Awards, and a massive award ceremony. It's in one of the biggest spaces in London where you can hold an award ceremony, and there are hundreds of people there. And I've been in the industry for so long. I know a lot of people, and it's such a brilliant place to speak to everybody. But I was saying to my husband, it was so funny, because I'm so obsessed across the board in what we do, from hard landscaping to soil to insects to everything. I guess I want to know every minor detail. But I was having conversations with people about stone, about steel, about fencing, literally about that, about slugs and about soil, because there are so many people, and everybody in their individual aspects of the career is so enthusiastic. It's lovely.
I find myself, because like I'm from the construction background originally, so that's where my passion started. But the more experience I get, the more I love the more detailed side of like soils and composting. I've listened to podcasts about composting and thought I have no interest in it, but I listened to it anyway, and then I love listening to that. I was listening to a podcast today about a guy who's studying birds, and then he was talking about how the type of plants you can get for certain birds, and Yeah,
Yeah.
things I look at the title of the episode and think I wouldn't have an interest in it, but I'll listen
No.
to it, and because the person loves what they do,
Yeah.
you enjoy it.
Exactly, because they're enthusiastic.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Now I'm
Yeah.
fascinating. Also, I've had spoken to a lot of people on the podcast, but the amount of people who've done graphic design and then go into design as well, it's really
Yeah.
fascinating seeing the links that
Mm,
the commonalities that people have.
definitely. And also set designers. Over here,
Yeah,
there's quite a lot of people that were set designers and that have moved in. I mean, it's the very same principle, isn't it? You know, you're kind of working within a frame and a set parameter, and you've got to come up with stuff. I mean, my background was actually mostly photography. So when I was at university, I did a graphic design degree for the photography pathway, but it was more photography. So, but any aspect of design like that, I'm obsessed with. It's still photography as well. You know, it's one of my kind of biggest loves. But I think that's where my training came from, because when I first went into the industry, my horticultural knowledge was really simple because I was just a home gardener. I had no training. So I think because I came to it from a design perspective rather than a horticultural perspective, I think when I first started, and the reason possibly that I got so much press is because I was looking at gardens possibly in a different way that people were coming to it from a horticultural side. I'm sort of guessing, but that training, my photography training, training my eye, training my eye in graphics is definitely key because, and I remember there's a brilliant designer over here called Paul Hensey, and he was saying that when he does judging or when he does adjudication for the Society of Garden Designers, you know, if you can read a plan and if you can see on a plan that the composition in that space feels balanced, it should work in real life. And that, you know, that's the same principle, isn't it?
mm. Yeah, that's something I struggled with in my early days of design, is getting the scale right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, so I want to put all these different things within the
Exactly.
design, but then once you build it, you think, oh no,
Yeah.
that I need to do better next time.
No, I mean, I think actually someone was asking me the other day, you know, what do you think are your strengths in design? And I think that one of my biggest strengths is that I'm very good in getting the composition right and in getting the spaces that feel ergonomically right, that feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And I don't set out with a kind of design intention, but a lot of people have said, "Oh my God, garden feels really zen. It feels really Japanese." And actually, that was a question I was going to ask you because obviously you originally reached out to me to say, you know, most time you can kind of picture where gardens are from.
Yeah.
But with mine,
It looked Australian, I thought. Yeah.
yeah, isn't that
And
funny?
and even the more I look at it, like the plants that you're using as well, like they're not
Yeah,
Australian natives or anything, but they're just common plants within Australia. So
yeah,
it's fascinating. Yeah, because
yeah,
like a lot of places use different like plants, and everyone sort of uses the same ones, but the ones
yes,
you're using are very common in Australia, which is pretty unusual.
extraordinary, really unusual. And actually, there was a couple of years ago, probably about 5 years ago, on my Instagram. I got this massive Australian following, and it must be from that because, but I equally haven't studied Australian gardens enough to see the link.
Yeah,
I mean, I can't remember if I was saying to you before, but you know, when I design a garden, I think my portfolio is quite eclectic, and I design every garden in response to the brief and to the site. And so I find it very difficult to kind of give myself a style. I mean, I'm sure other people can see it, but I find it very difficult. Yes, my style is classic contemporary. You can either go kind of classic or you can kind of go contemporary. You know, that's my, but I'm neither kind of, I don't push to the extremes of those two. But yeah, it's, I mean, I just love it. As I said, I'm obsessed. So it's always really interesting to see when other people look at it, especially you and other Australians that have gone, wow, it really looks like they're Australian landscapes.
even the use of the hardscaping as well. It's got that kind of look. Like at your you've got a second Instagram account where you're documenting your a house renovation. They call it, I think it's
Mm,
a 60s revamp, and in that,
yeah.
like you've got some big floating steps. Like are they concrete or that
It's
you?
it's a Portuguese limestone.
All right.
So it
So
was
that's
originally,
yeah, it kind of looks a bit like concrete, and like that's
yeah,
it's a real big trend in Australia.
yeah,
Been going on for a
right.
little while, but the floating concrete steps.
Yeah. So that originally they were going to be concrete. So they were going to be poured concrete elements, and then they were going to be poured concrete steps. And when I went to go and look at some in situ that had been in gardens and sites for a long time, they just looked a bit lifeless. I'd imagine in Australia, your climate is very different to ours, and ours is very temperate and can be literally kind of wet and damp for 5 months of the year. And were we back onto the heath, I just thought that's just not going to work. But I needed something that was going to be industrial, because the whole idea behind this scheme for my house was to embrace the 60s and the 70s. So, kind of thinking about the materials that they were using concrete, they were using steel, they were using glass, and in a kind of, a very clever, minimal, contemporary way, but not overly minimal. And I was contacting stone suppliers that I use, and I said, look, I'm trying to find something that looks like concrete but isn't concrete. I want to see the aggregate. I want to see the kind of roughness and the rawness of it. And the company that I contacted, CED, they said, actually, weirdly, we've just got something which is coming in from Portugal, and it's a Portuguese limestone, and it looks like it's concrete. The way that it's sandblasted and acid etched, it's got that quality to it. And when the sample arrived, I was like, wow, this is amazing. And actually, it's got so much life in it. I think that's the kind of beauty of it, that concrete in the UK after a while can look a bit soulless. But I'd imagine in Australia, because the light levels are so different, it probably looks very different.
No, it still looks pretty lifeless, I reckon. Like that, I love the
Yeah,
steps you've done. Like I've zoomed in to try and work out whether it was concrete or whether it was a tile. They've done a good miter on the corners, but I could see
yeah,
it was a single block because it was just
yeah,
arist. But it's
yeah.
beautiful looking stone, and then because you get more character in it rather than just doing a burnished concrete.
Exactly. And my landscaper, James Thompson, who built the garden for Plot Landscaping, who's the most phenomenal landscaper. His precision is unbelievable. I mean, in this garden, it's literally millimeter perfect. I mean, he was phenomenal. And when we were going through the process, so obviously he was on board when I said I'm going to use poured concrete, and he was like, okay, great. And then I said, actually, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do it in solid stone. He was like, great. And how am I going to lay that? Because that is a feat of engineering. I was like, well, let's find out a way together. And actually, through the stone company, they then put us in contact with this brilliant machine hire company. And but it was probably the most terrifying thing I think that either of us have ever done, trying to lay these slabs when you've got a magnetic, a suction plate, which is picking up these massive
All right.
pieces up against, glass to glass windows. I mean, I think he nearly had a heart attack, bless him, but it was worth it.
You want to get it right the first time.
Totally, but there were moments where we were both a bit like, oh God, this is terrifying. But you got to
So,
go through the pain sometimes.
yeah. So where did your horticultural knowledge come from? Did you learn any of it when you were studying design?
Yeah, so when I was studying my garden design course in 2006, we would do plant idents, but horticulture not so much. So I learned on the job basically.
Yeah.
And I also did a planting plan diploma, so plants and planting plan diploma at a different college. And that is, I mean, it's the same thing. You've got to respond to the site, you've got to respond to the aspect, you've got to respond to the soil, you've got to respond to the brief. And because I was so obsessed, I just immersed myself in it. I love perennials and I love grasses, but equally there's an importance in structure. And one thing that really appealed to me when I was looking at different courses is that on the Inchbold prospectus at that time, I don't know if it still says it, but they said that when the way that they teach garden design is that, you are designing an exterior space, and that plants are not horticultural gems, but 3D masses. And I thought, wow, that's a really interesting way to look at it. But so you obviously need to understand what you're planting, but they are not first and foremost in your mind. It's about, form over function. And I always say to clients, look, plants will literally be the last thing that I think about. I will have a vague idea of which way I'm taking it. And when I said earlier, when I said I don't think I have a style, my planting, I definitely have a planting style. So I think that's where you can see the thread through my designs. but I will know what planting beds I'm going to be doing, but what plants are going in those until literally the final moment. That is how I work. But trees, obviously I will be designing very early on with trees in mind, and I will know what trees I'll be going in, but what's going at the base of them at that point, I won't know. So my horticultural knowledge, I've just learned over 18 years, but I haven't done any RHS courses or anything like that, but I know enough.
Yeah. Well, the learning on the job is the best way to do it anyway, because you could read a book for as long as you want, but actually seeing plants together, how they actually grow where you're working, let alone regardless of where the book says that they'll work. So that's the best way to do it. And I also love what you said about like the particular plant are the last thing you think of, because I've done a few designs. Like in our designs, we'll specify all the plants, but there's been a couple where they didn't want to spend much on a design, so I just did a mud map. And then when the gardens were done, then I went to the nursery and got some plants. And I find they're my best planting plans, because I'm just looking at the plants together, seeing how the foliage all works and the textures and the colors. And you just sort of make it up with, like, I can see it easier that way. So it's a good way to do it.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think you're right. And I think there is that thing that there's too much emphasis on theoretical knowledge, that you're right, you need to get the practical experience.
Yeah.
100%, and go and visit gardens and go and see different planting things and find out what floats your boat. Not everybody's gonna like my style of planting. My style of planting is only good for particular clients who are willing to embrace those seasonal changes, and they're happy to see seed heads and not perfection all the time. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a garden which is embracing all the seasons. I mean, my garden at the moment is a brilliant kind of, I'm just looking at it as I'm talking to you. It's a brilliant kind of, plethora of things which are going over and seed heads. But that's what I love. I love that sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Because there's so much more interest in it, rather than just seeing something flower for 1 or 6 weeks a year and the rest of it is just green and that's all it is.
Exactly.
What's the landscape design learning like in the UK at the moment? Because in Australia, certainly in Victoria, the state that I'm in, there's a lot of courses that are getting pulled, and there's like less landscape design courses being offered. Wow. So it's hard for people to learn it.
Yeah, there's a big boom over here.
Yeah, right.
There's amazing colleges. So there's the college that I was at, which is at Inchbold. There's one called the London College of Garden Design, which is great. And actually, I did a course there in 2019 for construction detailing.
Yeah, we've got one of them that started in Melbourne. So it's the London College of Garden Design.
Oh, Melbourne. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. And that's awesome. That's like the best way to do it these days.
Yeah.
Because they teach you design and plants and construction, the whole lot.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So I went back to them in 2019 to do this construction detailing course, and it was basically geared at people that have been in the industry for a long time. So even landscape architects, because the projects that I was working on were getting bigger and bigger, and I couldn't necessarily work with the landscapers that I'd been working with for a very long time. I had to set stuff out to tender. I had to produce a full tender package, whereas before, I would give the landscapers that I was working with, who I've got a good relationship with, to say, well, I want to do it like this. And, I would still specify, sub bases and things like that, but I'd have to put a complete package together. So I went there to go and do that. And God, it was the best 3 months ever. I mean, I'm such a geek for stuff like that. And I absolutely loved it. And also could be in a room with lots of other designers and people that were coming in who are specialists. I would go back and do it again. I just can't get enough of it. It's ridiculous. And there's another college called KLC, and there's some other ones in the north of England as well. No, there's loads.
Yeah, right.
There's loads. I think we are a nation obsessed.
Yeah. Yeah. Even the garden shows, you've got a lot more garden shows than we do here as well. So, and more history behind them too.
Yeah, maybe. But you'd think with you guys that because you've got so much of an outdoor lifestyle than we have, because we just don't have the climate for it all the time, you'd think there would be a bigger market for it, but
that makes too much sense.
Exactly.
But one of the problems here as well is a lot of like landscape architecture and landscape design, they don't teach much about plants and horticulture, but the London College of Garden Design is probably the best at that.
Yeah.
But a lot of people, like landscape architects, will come out qualified and they know nothing about plants.
No, which is really hard, because you'd think for something like that you would have a really good backbone to it. I mean, it's like, it's one thing. You've got to know both. You've got to know both equally well. You've got to know your hard landscaping and you've got to know your soft landscaping. That's what you're dealing with.
Yeah.
You can't go into it not having a good idea about either of them. But yeah, plants are like imperative, aren't they?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what gets people passionate as well. That's what they enjoy the most.
Yeah. And probably why they've gone into it.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned barley before, so I know that's an acronym of your landscape industry. So what does that stand for?
The British Association of the Landscape Industries.
So that's a nationwide thing, is it?
It's nationwide, yeah.
Yeah. And so how long have you been a member for that?
I'm actually not a member. I'm going through membership at the moment. So that is really majority for landscapers.
All right.
And the Society of Garden Designers is obviously for designers. I'm pre-registered there. I've got to submit my final project for adjudication. But I'm going to start getting everything together for the barley membership this year, actually, because now I've got my garden and I've kind of got, a good bump of information to put in, because it's quite a rigorous adjudication that you have to go through. But I was invited. I went along with a soil supplier here called Born Amenity. I went on their table. They invited me. So yeah,
it's good. And it's good that they don't just let anyone sign up, because then that sort of creates a bit of quality about it.
Exactly, totally. And so when you're working with a barley approved landscaper, you know that they're going to be fantastic, because the adjudicators go to the sites. They see all their work, they answer them questions. It's quite a rigorous process to go through.
Yeah, it's similar with the landscape in Victoria, which is it's construction design and maintenance all under the one umbrella. They're an industry association for the state, but they'll interview clients and look at your work. And,
yeah, exactly. It's the same thing.
Yeah.
So how many projects?
You just give them the clients who have been the happiest with you. You're not going to give them money to but still, at least it's something that it's a hurdle to jump.
Yeah. So how many projects would you have to submit for that?
I think it was 3. I joined when I started 14 years ago, so I can't remember back then, but I think it's 3.
And do they, I think with barley, you have to, maybe it's another one, maybe it's the APLA. I think after 10 years, they come out and they check again. I think it might be a kind of sort of update.
No, I don't do anything like that. But where if you're building landscapes, you have to be a registered landscaper, and they'll do make sure you can still get your license and that sort of thing. So
brilliant, which is what they should do here, and they should do that in construction here.
Yeah, it only just changed recently when I got my license. So that was probably 7 years ago. But it used to be once you got your license, that was it. They'd never hear from them again.
Really?
Yeah. Now it's I think you have to redo it every 5 years, I think.
Yeah, but I think that's fair. I think that's fair, but they should do that here. There are so many people who they're just horror stories, especially for builders.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the thing over here. There's a lot of they're not so much anymore, but there was a lot of landscapers who they'd sort of take a deposit and they never see them again, or they do work they're not licensed to do, so they don't do it properly. So there was a big push probably 15 years ago to start getting everyone registered.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and every state is different, which makes it harder. But some are more strict than others.
Right. But no, it makes sense. I should push for that here.
Yeah, it takes a lot of work for the associations to get anything to change. They all care more about building than actual landscaping. So it's all more builders rather than landscapers, because there's so many different sub trades within building.
Of course, yeah.
So you're in London, is that correct? Is that where you do most of your work?
Yeah. So I started my design career in North London, which is where I used to live. And so I still get a lot of work that way, because I still get a lot of referrals there. I'm now in Southwest London, and I'm getting more work this way. But to be honest, as long as it's sort of within London, that's where I will take stuff. Occasionally I will get things outside. So I did a project 2 years ago in Suffolk, which is on the East Coast. that was for some clients that I'd worked with before. So that was a really nice one to do. I think if it was somebody that I hadn't worked with before at that distance, because it's so far away, it's like a 4-hour drive, very hard when you don't know the clients and you don't know the landscapers. I'm not actually saying that I probably would, but that was a really nice job to do because I knew the clients.
Yeah.
But yes, that's basically where I'm based. I'm based in London.
And I've had there's been a few Australian landscapers I've spoken to who've been over to London and worked for a few years before coming back here, and they all talk about the horrible access because you've got to go through a house to get to the backyard. So does that impact the way you design the garden as well? Like, there a lot of your gardens are like that, are they?
Yeah. Yes, some of them have been. I've been quite lucky actually that a lot of the projects that I've worked on have been for bigger houses, and so they then tend to be semi-detached. Some of them we've had to go through the house, but that is literally one of the first questions that I ask.
Yep.
You know, can I see? So the way that I work is that people will contact me. I say, please, can you send me photos of the garden before we have a phone call, just so I can kind of get my head around the space and what's the access like? Because that is just, you know, it really can dictate, you know, what you want to do. Obviously, if the budget is there, in some situations you will crane over the house.
Yep.
Which can be, but that's incredibly expensive. And, you know, London streets are not particularly wide.
I was going to say you'd have to shut it down, yeah.
You know, all that sort of stuff. But yeah, it is a bit of a bugbear. And actually it's always the first thing that landscapers ask. When I say, oh, I've got a job in, you know, wherever, they say, what's the access like?
Yep.
So what was their experience of working in London, these Australian landscapers? Did they like
they
it?
all spoke positively of it. Yeah, they said the quality was really good. So yeah, because all countries do things differently. So some people might not do it to the same standard or as complex as what we do. But yeah, they said there was all good stories.
Yeah, I've been fortunate enough to work with a couple of Australians. My main contractor is from New Zealand.
Yeah.
And he has lots of guys that come over from New Zealand and work with him. And
yeah,
they obviously love it. They love the proximity to Europe, you know, so that's the kind of benefit. Yeah,
well, that's the crazy thing about Australia is that it's bigger than Europe in a landmass. Like, that's how massive it is. But something that I can't remember who said it, but they said that the UK landscapers like Australians and New Zealanders because they've got a good work ethic. Like, they like to get stuck in.
Yeah, very much so. I know, definitely. And actually, it just they always bring such a nice energy. Yeah. You know, the ones that I work with have always been a really happy bunch, and very good work ethic. I mean, all the landscapers that I've worked with have got a brilliant work ethic, and equally, it's also what we were saying before, because they love it. They're really passionate about it. Yeah. So,
and they want to be doing projects that have been designed as well, not just ones that are done on a mud back. No. I mean, I think, you know, in some cases, you know, there are some very, very good landscapers who are also very good designers, and, you know, they're very happy kind of doing that. Other people will want, you know, a garden that's been designed that they can build. And for some clients, you know, some clients will contact me, and for the budget that they've got, I would say you're much better just to go straight to a landscaper when you know what you want. And you want decking there, and you want a lawn, and you want something else. There's no point in employing me. Well, one, because some of my fees are going to eat into your budget, which is not beneficial. So, you know, go directly to those landscapers, because a lot of landscapers have got a really good eye for it. Yeah. How did you go about finding the right ones? Do you just have it just coincidentally they build it because the client picked them, and then you realize they do a good job, so then you keep on giving them work?
I've never had that the clients have found them. It's usually that I'm watching, I'm not watching, but I'm seeing what other people are doing. I'm seeing what other landscapers are building. And it will be totally appropriate to the site and to the job. So there will be specific landscapers that I will work for particular clients and particular jobs. So there's a roof terrace job that I did on the Strand, and in my mind and the co-designer that I work with, there was only really one landscaping company that we thought that would be the best at it, because they're so good and because that's so specialized. And also depends on the location. You know, there are some people that I would love to work with, but it's just too far. You know, trying to get across London or even around London is so difficult, and a lot of landscapers won't want to travel. So it will depend on the site, it will depend on the brief, it will depend on the specification. But we've got a massive pool of people here to call upon, and a lot of the time you need to get in with the good ones very quickly because they could be booked up 6 months in advance.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
must be the same with you, isn't it?
Yeah, at least. Yeah. We're like, especially when COVID was going, it was 12 months. But, so it was,
Wow, yeah.
yeah. Because it's a lot easier it's a lot quicker to design a project than build it.
Oh, 100%. Definitely. Well, as there's always that saying, isn't it, that actually the design is like 10% of the process. As a garden designer, the design is 10% of what I'm doing. The rest of it is the briefing, the logistics, the, dealing with client expectations and all that sort of stuff. It's a smaller part. That's what I was going to ask you, actually. Things have sort of slowed down a little bit here post-COVID because had been in a COVID bubble, and now everything's kind of running to a normal kind of time frame. How have you found it?
Yeah, exactly the same. Like people are, starting to say that things are getting a lot quieter. The phone's ringing less.
Yeah.
It's not certainly not anything to worry about at the moment. But I'm sure there's some
No.
people who are worried. They're always we've got more and less than the average. But
Oh, definitely.
but yeah, it's definitely ringing a lot less the phone. But my company, we're only 3 qualified landscapers, so we're small, so it doesn't take long to book us up.
No.
So I'm not too
Good
concerned,
position
but
to be in.
yeah, there's not a lot of the smaller jobs around.
No. So what I can't work out, because we've all been in such a funny kind of COVID haze, is that are we back to pre-COVID? So are we back to actually the level that we were working at before and the amount of inquiries that were before? I can't remember.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's because
in
it does
COVID,
go in cycles. It's not like it's been exactly the same for 10 years before COVID. It always quiet times and busy time.
And also for here, we had interest rates just went absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so there was projects that were coming in and people that were, paying the deposit and then saying, actually, we need to put a hold on this for 6 months because we don't know where this is going to take us, which is understandable. But when I was at the awards do on Friday, I was asking people and they were saying, yeah, it's the same thing. So it's obviously across the board and across the world. It's very interesting to hear that you guys have got the same thing.
Yep. Yeah, exactly the same. Like interest rates are as high as they've been for a while, but they're not like, I think 14 years ago when we built our house, our first one, and the interest rates were higher then than what they are now. So yeah, it's all relative to the sort of period of time because it also depends on how expensive other things are as well. But like if you going to the supermarket and just everything's insanely expensive, so it's not just the interest rates; it's everything that's expensive. So even though the interest rates are lower, it hurts more because of everything else higher.
Yeah,
but it's so fascinating that it's worldwide. It's not just, and it's all around at the same time.
Yeah. No, exactly. It sort of makes us all feel a little bit better in a funny kind of way.
Yeah. Well, I've heard people say they reckon the interest rates go down next year at some stage. So that'd be nice. But the people who are more affected by the interest rate rises are the ones spending like less amount on their landscaping. So that's why the smaller jobs are quieter because the people who are stupidly wealthy, it doesn't bother them because they've got investments as well as mortgages. So
exactly.
So that's it affects the lower end of the market where there are more landscapers working in that end of the market. So
definitely. Yeah,
it is getting quieter, but
the same thing with the food here. Food is so expensive here at the moment. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, I talked to my wife about it, but she rolls her eyes because I do the shopping so she doesn't understand it. So I messaged my dad because he does the shopping as well. So, can you see how expensive this is? Just it blows my mind how but I could talk about that for 8 hours. Just going to the supermarket. So do you just work by yourself, do you?
Yes, just me. So a couple of years ago, when I was getting really busy, I got to the point that I thought, I think I probably need to get an assistant or two. I need to get some help. But then I was kind of trying to figure out what I would give people to do because I love the design process and I love doing the planting plans. I love the whole process.
Yeah.
So, and I just thought, what am I going to hand over? What would I give them to do? Because there's so much in that design detailing that I'm working out as I'm going. And that to me is incredibly important. I think if I was turning out designs that were very similar, perhaps, or I was running a kind of design and build, where you've basically got a team of landscapers that you're supporting, and you've got people that are coming in, clients, and they know what they want, and it's a quick turnaround. I just kind of thought, actually, I think I just need to keep it with me. But also, I'm fortunate that I work on some really nice big projects, and so I can take on probably comfortably 5 to 6 projects a year, and I'm really happy managing those. And also, the people want me; they want to be able to deal with me. I've worked in design studios before, where there was always that really difficult balance where you've got the one main designer who the clients are coming in to work for, and then you've got the assistants who are picking up the job. Well, the clients don't really want to work with the assistant. The client really wants to be able to work with the principal designer. For some studios, it works because, the kind of bigger studios, they're really happy managing it like that. But I think because I've never done it, I think it also shows I'm a bit of a control freak. And I think at some point I will go down that road. But with life and with children and with the balance that I've got, I'm really happy with kind of, where I'm doing it.
Yeah.
But everybody's different, and everybody wants to grow at different rates. Friends of mine who are designers who've got studios, they love it. So there's 3 of you, is there?
Yeah, well, there's 3 in the construction side of things, and then I've got a landscape architect as well. So,
oh, great.
And then I do, because my plan was to do a bit of both.
Yeah.
But we just have to focus on the construction side of things at the moment, because that's a higher turnover. So the more I do that, the more money we've got. But yeah, I do love doing the design, and that's what I've got to move into, because I can't do design until I'm 70 when my home loan finishes. So I'll have to do a bit of design as well.
Yeah,
because I love doing that as well. And I've also learned, I've done zero study in design. It's just learned from working for some of the best landscape designers in Australia.
Yeah.
So I just take little bits and pieces from all of them, and then mold it into my own.
But again, that's, you're working on the job, you're learning on the job. That's an amazing thing to do.
And I'll make plenty of mistakes.
If you're in that position, do you need to go? Do you need to do any design training? Probably not. I mean, I couldn't see why you would, if you've got enough experience, or other people that are in that position. I know landscapers who are also taking the leap into going to doing more design, and they've contacted me and said, do you think it's worth it? It's like, well, it's down to your individual preference, isn't it? It's whether you feel that you want it. But for these guys, I'm like, I don't think that you do. I think, unless it's learning to use how computer packages and things like that, but that sort of thing, you can go on courses for that.
Yeah, it's one of those things I do see. Like when I work, like we see some amazing designs come across our desk from people who are really talented landscape designers. So then when I look at them compared to what I would produce, I think, oh, maybe it is worthwhile. But it's also, some people are just naturally talented in that sort of thing as well. They're naturally creative. So it doesn't matter whether you study or not. They've got that skill.
Yes, totally. So you've worked with Paul Bungay, haven't you?
I've done, a couple of his gardens, But I was talking to one of their designers the other day, or probably a month ago, and he was saying, because whenever they call me up, I'm too busy now. So that's how insane we're going. I would never have thought I would say I'm too busy to build one of his gardens, but
no, I was going to say.
But we've got and that's the thing. We used to we get to work for some amazing designers. So we're not doing many of our own designs, but we're still working on amazing projects done by other designers. So just extremely lucky in what we're doing.
That's a lovely position to be in.
Yeah, but that's the thing. He's got probably 5 landscape architects on his team. So it's sort of going back to what you're saying, working for yourself. It depends on what you're wanting to get out of it. Because I was going to say, when you said people want you doing the design, especially because your name is in the business name, but then I did think of Paul as well, so his name is in there. But I think he goes out to every appointment anyway.
Yeah, I'd imagine he was. There's actually a friend of mine who has done the same thing. She had her company name. She had her name as her company name, and she's getting bigger and bigger. And she's now got a team of 5 designers and landscape architects that work for her. She's thinking about rebranding, so it's not her name.
Yeah,
for exactly that reason, because it's really difficult because the clients just want her, and she's got a massive, online presence. So it's her face, it's that same thing that people want it. And that's the other thing that I was going to say, is that for me, I work on majority London gardens. So for people who are working on really, really big jobs, we're talking about landscapes, and we're talking about, gardens that are in Surrey and other places which are enormous, that I definitely would get somebody in to help me on those, because you would have so many things that would need, but there are brilliant freelancers that are happy to do that. So I've not been in the position that I've needed to do it, but I would definitely do it if I needed it. And also on other jobs, I've done 2 jobs, co-designed it with a really lovely designer called Anna Sanchez Martin, and that was great. And they were 2 big jobs, and so we then, we divided out what we were going to do, but to be able to have that support with it for each other was incredible.
Yeah, that's something I'm looking to do. Is I want to have ideally at least 2 landscape architects or designers on. So not only for being able to turn over, like say, yes to more projects, but also so that there's 2 people in the design office who can sort of bounce ideas off each other, and they're sort of not working on their own and getting lonely. So
definitely,
there's benefits
it's
to it.
incredibly important, because there will come a point where you kind of go, oh, I'm not sure about that detail, and you want someone to be able to talk to.
Yeah.
My husband is a creative director, so he's my toughest critic, because that's what he does all day. All day he just creative directs work. So when I first started out, I kind of had to not take offense by it, because I was so precious, and I am precious about my designs, but he ripped them apart. Well, I don't understand why you've done that, like, oh, I just spent all day doing that. But yeah, it's good. It is good to have that. It's good to have that kind of balance. You're right, to get 2 people in to be able to do that.
Yeah. It's almost like if you're going to employ someone, rather than have 1, you need to have 2. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Definitely.
But that's, again, just sort of work that out as you go, because it also depends on the type of people that you got. You could put on 1 person and they love working by themselves and they get heaps done. You could get on 2 people and they hate each other and they don't get along well at all. So it varies on the person.
Yeah, you've got to find that synergy.
When I was doing my research on you, I saw on your website you had a couple of links to some videos, and there was one where you were interviewed at the Chelsea Flower Show. It was 3 years ago, and you said part of your 5-year plan is to design a garden at Chelsea.
Well, I think that was actually 8 years ago, that video. Oh, really? But I think because it was on I changed my website. And so rather than having it on the website, I thought I'll put it up on YouTube. And so I think it was put up on YouTube 3 years ago, but it was actually 8 years ago. Yeah, that was my intention. And I did have that in my mind. That was like a 5-year plan. I'm definitely going to aim to do a show garden. It's just not happened. I'm so busy. But again, I think there's that thing of being, 1-woman band. There's only so much time.
Yeah.
And, if you're in a design studio, then you can do it, because it takes up so much time. Well, how much time it takes up for a show garden.
Yeah.
So financially, you've got to be in a position where you can go, right, I can block out, that build up to it, probably 6 weeks, in your schedule, to be able to kind of, look after the kind of pre-build, the post-build, the build. I would love to do one. I've just not had the opportunity, nor have I sought it. I've not looked for it. I've not kind of chased it.
Yep.
And the kind of now I don't know. I've seen friends of mine do them and go through it, and it looks so stressful. And the older I get, the more I think, oh, do I want that stress? But then people who come out the other side of it, they're then addicted to it. And they're like, oh, it was the worst experience and the best experience of my life. And now I want to do another one. So I can see the benefit of it, and I can see the power of it. And I think also, you can, in show gardens, creativity wise, you can push it to the absolute limits. You can come up with some really great ideas. And I think because in the last couple of years, I've had some really nice clients and been creatively challenged, I've just focused my efforts on that.
Yeah.
So I never say never, but it's a little further down on the list now.
Yep. We'll put it on the 10-year goal.
Exactly. And then I'll repost it in another 3 years, and then it'll be a 30-year goal.
Yeah, it's funny you say, like, people do get addicted to it. I've certainly was like that. Like, I've built 8 gardens at the Melbourne Flower and Garden Show. Not all, most of them are smaller ones, but it's such an awesome experience. You meet so many amazing people. But when you're doing the design and constructing yourself, it does cost a couple of dollars to do that.
Yeah, gosh, I bet. So do you get sponsorship as well? Is there a sponsorship element for it?
It's a bit different because I've spoken to Peter Donegan, who's he's did Melbourne this year and he's coming back again next year. He's from Ireland.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's actually also sponsored by the CED group who you mentioned before. I'm pretty sure it
Yes.
was last year at
Yeah.
least. But I've
Yeah.
spoken to him about different garden shows and the RHS ones, and he said how you get paired up with a sponsor and they spend
Yes.
a lot of it. But what you do here is you just sort of get the materials sponsored. So I'll talk to a paving supplier,
Right.
Granite Works supply pavers. You talk
Right.
to nurseries for the plants. So you go to get a heaps of different suppliers to help you out.
Yeah.
And whatever you can't get, then you got to pay for yourself. So
Wow.
yeah.
But then I guess the exposure's worth it. Yeah. So here, show gardens are majority of the time sponsored by a business or charity. But even then, you can see on some show gardens, it also says thank you for additional sponsorship by XYZ. So it won't cover everything. I do know designers that have put their own money into it as well.
Yeah.
But I guess it's sort of part of the package, isn't it? It's such good exposure, especially something like the Chelsea Flower Show. The media exposure for that is off the charts.
Yeah.
No, it's on 5 days a week on TV. It's on, for hours. It's also on BBC Two, plus all the press coverage. It's amazing for people.
Yeah. Well, the Philip Johnson, who's the first Australian to win Best in Show at Chelsea, I can't remember how many years ago it was, but he's just built a replica of the garden that he built at Chelsea in Victoria, but it's like 20 times the size. So that's like a permanent installation of it. So, and it's, yeah. But yeah, there
was for a good couple of years, and I'm going back to sort of 2007, 2008, 9. There was an Australian group that was coming over to do show gardens at Chelsea, and their gardens are always amazing. They were phenomenal, and they were the biggest team of guys and girls. But yeah, their stuff was extraordinary. The construction detailing was, something to be admired.
Yeah, I think it might have been Fleming's. And I think they might have called themselves the Trail Finders or something like that.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly what it was. Yeah.
Yeah. So they would sponsor, heaps of people to go over there, like different designers for different years. It was awesome what they did for the industry.
Oh, amazing. Really amazing. I was going to ask you a question, actually, if you don't mind, because over here, we've sort of got, we're getting very hot summers at the moment. We're getting like 42 degrees. But then we're obviously getting very cold winters at the same time, just the kind of the way that the climate is moving. And you guys obviously get real extremes in weather. Are you changing the planting that you're using, or is your indigenous planting so good there and so adaptive that you don't have so much of a problem, or are you struggling as much as we are?
No, our last 2 summers were really mild. Because I love it when it gets 40 degrees. Yeah. The hotter it is, the better. So I know when it's not. And the last 2 years haven't been that bad. But I think now it's changed to La Nina or El Nino, whichever one it is.
Yes,
the dry one. So now it's going to be the hotter summer. And the winter that had just gone was the warmest winter I've ever experienced. And not much rain. So it is definitely getting warmer in the cooler parts. And also more rain, like where there were some places that had 3 meters of rain in spring last year. So just over a few month period in New South Wales. So yeah, the weather's getting weird, but in terms of plants, there's nothing that's that you can't use anymore because of the weather. So certainly anyone using indigenous plants is going to do a lot better. But there's almost like a pocket of people who use natives and indigenous and natural style designs, and people who don't. So, but I'm sort of someone who hasn't in the past, but I'm seeing a lot of plants that are such good plants to use, and they look good as well. So, I'm starting to change that as well, but not out of necessity, it's just out of desire to use those plants and just sort of learning about more plants.
Yeah. So we have here quite regularly hosepipe bans. There is something that the Society of Garden Designers managed to negotiate, which was incredibly, it was probably with Barley and with APL, that if you've just planted a new garden as an industry garden, that you you basically kind of get a bit of an allocation to be able to use water from a hose to be able to water the gardens. You know, for some people, you can imagine you've just spent thousands and thousands of pounds on plants, and then there's a hose pipe ban. It's like, well, that's not going to work. But that's only for the first season. Do you have water bans and things like that? Like, what's your sort of water supply like?
No, we're fine. Like everything's full, like all the reservoirs, as far as I'm aware. Like we have had in the past. So we used to only use tall fescue grass, like it's a nice lush grass. Uses heaps of water. And then when the drought happened and there was water restrictions, no one could water. You weren't allowed to water anything. But like you might have been able. I can't remember if you could do like 1 hour a week or something minimal.
Yeah.
So everyone was installing tanks and ripping out the grass and putting gravel in.
Right.
And then when they lifted, no one put in tanks anymore, and everyone starts putting in grass again, but drought tolerant grass.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was, I don't know, that might have been 2008 or 2007, and it haven't been any restrictions since then. So
good.
Yeah, because that makes it so much harder, and you have to be more restrictive on what plants you can use as well.
Totally. I mean, for here, we've got a bit of an issue at the moment because our winters can be very, very wet. And then our summers can be incredibly dry. So it's a really hard pool of plants to be able to use that can cope with that extreme wet and it cope with that extreme dry.
Yeah.
So we're all having to kind of have a big rethink at the moment to see what things are going to work in the long term. There's an amazing guy called James Hitchmo. Have you heard of him?
No.
I think he's actually a professor. I should probably call him Professor James Hitchmo. And he was at a university in Sheffield, which I think is in the northeast. My geography so bad, if excuse me. But his work and a guy called Nigel Dunnett is extraordinary. So they've been way ahead of the curve for a very, very long time, looking at different plants. And he did a brilliant talk recently, and he was saying, you know, I think we'll find in the next kind of 5-10 years that we're not going to be able to use XYZ, you know, things like hydrangeas or kind of really sort of, you know, kind of those sort of plants. But it's fascinating, and it's happened. I mean, we all knew that it was coming, but it all sort of feels like it's happened very quickly, and we're kind of, you know, trying to do the best that we can. But it's incredibly hard, especially when you've got clients who aren't, you know, who aren't on the same wavelength. They're aware of it, but they don't understand it fully. So it's also trying to educate them in the kind of understanding.
They still want those plants. They say, oh yeah, I know about that, but I still want it here.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone else can not have it, but I want
it. Totally. Yeah.
But I have heard of Nigel. I did send him a message to see if he'd be keen to come on, even though I know he's a bit of a fish. I sent him the same day. I sent him and Monty Dunn a message just to see if they'd be keen, but haven't heard back.
Have you heard anything back?
No, not yet.
I actually, Monty's just released a new book. I actually sent him a message and said, come and do an Instagram live with me. It's like tumbleweed. I'm sure he's very busy, and he does mean to reply to me, and he'll come back to me.
Yeah, I got an email from his assistant, but she said I'll get back to you. So
yeah.
Maybe
he's a man in demand.
Yeah,
he's a man in demand. Yeah, Nigel Dunnett would be a great one to do one with.
Yeah. Last question for you is: who do you think would be a good guest to have on the podcast?
That was so funny, because I was just about to say to you, who have you got coming up next? From the UK? Someone from the UK, do you think?
Yeah, that'd be good.
Another designer or a landscaper?
Either. Whoever you think would be a good guest.
Have you ever interviewed Dermot Garvin? Do you know him? Who's an Irish designer. So I was talking to somebody about him at the awards do, and he used to produce the most phenomenal Chelsea Flower Show gardens. Like, he always broke the mold. He's the most incredible horticulturalist plus designer. He's amazing. And he would be somebody that I would love, because he does a couple of lives, but he would be a really interesting one to talk to, because he really thinks outside the box as far as kind of design goes. And landscapers, well, there are two who are really highly regarded. I mean, there are so many brilliant ones in the industry, but there's a chap called Mark Gregory who's amazing, who is from his company called Landform, and he's done an incredible amount of show gardens. He's also got quite a kind of few amazing titles behind his name, like RHS ambassador and all sorts of, I can't remember what the other ones are. So he would be a really interesting one to talk to. And also a chap that I spoke to last week called Gareth Wilson. He's another one. So they're kind of really top landscapers in the industry that I think that would be really, really good to talk to. But yeah, try Mark first, because I've already done one with Gareth.
Awesome. No, well, thank you so much for coming on. Yeah, like I said, I love your style, so it was awesome to talk to you and get to hear your story. So thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you so much for inviting me today. It was a real privilege. It was such a nice message to get.